And hello, welcome back to yet again another episode of the Hackable You podcast. Winter is coming, it is getting colder in the UK, it is getting darker, but we're still here ready to record some great cybersecurity content for you. As always, I'm joined by Will. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you very much. And Alex is with us again.
I'm back after my break. I feel great.
How was it?
Yeah, really.
Where did you go? What did you do?
I went to Centre Parks. I spent a week in the forest. It was really nice to just disconnect. I think that was the most important thing I had to do, was disconnect.
Real proper social distancing there, I bet.
Yeah, exactly. Literally. Just me and the deers.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, it's been another few busy weeks, but we can't start the podcast without talking about the recent UK government scheme about retraining and the whole premise that if you're a ballerina, you can retrain and your next potential job is in cyber. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I'm all for bringing people into the industry. We're massive advocates of that, but it just made me giggle a little bit by the way in which the government portrayed this by saying, those in roles that are at risk of redundancy or impact from the coronavirus, you should retrain. And the one thing that they decided to focus on is that a ballerina's next role should be within cyber. Guys, what do you think about that?
I think that they probably could have chosen perhaps a better example.
Yeah, slightly more aligned.
A slightly less extreme example. Perhaps an example that was more relatable to people who might be considering a career change. I don't know many ballerinas.
You are one.
Some might agree, but I wouldn't imagine that many are, keeping an eye on the cybersecurity industry as an escape route.
Yeah, I mean, if all of this fails, guys, you will see me doing Sugar Plum Fairy on a stage near you.
I mean this in a nice way possible, but no one wants to see that.
You know what? The best thing I saw about this was so after the announcement and the PR of Fatima, the ballerina, becoming the next cyber security analyst or something, the Hackney County Council were hit by a cyber attack, likely ransomware. And the meme went around of Boris Johnson calling up Hackney Council going, "Fatima, is that you? I need your help."
Yeah, that made me laugh for a long time.
Oh dear. Anyway, we digress. Let's kick off the cybersecurity news for this episode. Okay, so we've got some great topics for you this week for the cyber news, and we'll start off with a really interesting one which relates to ransomware being deployed by a virtual image. This item relates to Maze ransomware, which has been seen to be being deployed via a virtual machine. And if you don't know what a virtual machine is or virtual technology, the best way I can describe it is it's essentially a computer within a computer. Now, a malicious MSI package would install VirtualBox software alongside a pre-made weaponized Windows 7 VM onto a victim's computer. The software then used shared storage drives between the virtual machine and the host to avoid endpoint detection, as the ransomware would encrypt via the VM onto the host's drives. The report published by Sophos states that the endpoint security software was able to detect and block this attack. However, it does go to show that attackers really do think of any way to infiltrate your system and to avoid detection. Proof, yet again, that Maze operators are highly sophisticated and capable. Now, guys, I don't know about you, but what this makes me think about is not only are we now having to focus on protecting all of our endpoints within our estate and making sure that they're successfully kind of covered and protected from antivirus and all these sorts of EDR functionalities now, but we now have to go even further. Are we going to have to think about protecting host-based virtual machines as well? The attack surface just got wider and I'm already busy enough. Thank you very much, Maze operators. What do you make of this one?
For me, it's a really, really cool technique. And like you just said, it really does increase the landscape that we're having to deal with in incident response and containment. What this actually hammers home for me as well is the effectiveness of an endpoint solution. I think the solution that did detect this was from Sophos, and it was based around behavioral analysis. So there was no signature-based detection involved. It was all around the endpoint solution thinking, hold on, some files are being encrypted. Oh, wait, some more. Or this process is trying to encrypt files. So rather than just your traditional signature-based detection, it's looking at behavior. And I think that is the next step up in the difference between your traditional AV and your EDR solution, or your sort of next-gen antivirus.
In true senses of the term, it's almost its own Trojan. It's a real Trojan horse, right? Because you're going in under the premise of VirtualBox, which is a normal application, a trusted application, and all of a sudden the pre-made weaponized Windows 7 VM is what's causing the ransomware to be deployed. So Maze ransomware just gets worse and worse, and now we're having to think about host-based virtual machines as well, so this could get interesting. Next up on the agenda looks at TrickBot botnet disruption. Now, we've mentioned TrickBot on the podcast a few times before. It has been described by some people as the world's biggest botnet, with the ability to drop other well-known infamous malware packages or ransomware. However, the US military are engaging in operations to disrupt the botnet and thwart its ability to continue its pandemic. The head of the US Cyber Command has stated that the counter-botnet activities are a persistent engagement, and makes comment around ensuring that there is a safe and secure US election, as Department of Homeland Security state that a ransomware attack on local voter register offices would cause havoc on election days. Now, private security researchers noticed on the 22nd of September and the 1st of October, a large number of TrickBot command and control servers were taken down without a real understanding about who was behind it. It has been described as a punch in the gut to the attackers behind TrickBot rather than a knockout blow. Further research shows that the disruption campaigns aim to use legitimate takedown legal procedures to cut the attacker's communication with the botnet off at a hosting provider level. I love this stuff. Real counter cyber activity. If it's conducted successfully, we might see that TrickBot goes altogether. Guys, what do you think about it? Is TrickBot here to stay? Is this a good news story?
I think we've spoken about this before, haven't we? And it's a pretty safe place to be, that we all think that hacking the hackers is awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to do more of it.
I genuinely would love to get involved with that. That's it's a really cool project. If you can call it a project.
It's like that. If you can't beat them, join them. Almost, you know what I mean? Like, we can sit here and we can build defenses all the time. We can better secure our networks. And don't get me wrong, that's why all of us have a job. That's why the industry is the industry. But there is so much of it which is that we've got to give them a taste of their own medicine and, take them down from the within. It's the whole reason we have like undercover police, I guess, and police officers that go inside drug cartels to bring them down from the inside, sort of thing. I think it's a really good idea. TrickBot is so vast though, and has been around for long enough, causing enough damage. I do think that, as it has mentioned in the article, right, a punch in the gut to the attackers rather than a knockout blow. I think this at the minute is probably just buying a little bit of time, which is much needed during the US election for sure.
And to touch very briefly on their infrastructure that TrickBot are using, so you're completely right, it's a punch in the gut, and it's definitely more of a rolling disruption attempt rather than a one and done. The way that their infrastructure is set up, and we have touched on this before in terms of how complex it is, there's been some examples of C2 within C2, and I'm coining this term now, I'm calling it nested C2, and that's where...
is that an Alex Stokes trademark?
Alex Stokes trademark, nested C2. That is where a victim reaches out to a C2 server, but then that destination actually hosts other C2 destinations, so it's not where you think it would be going to, it's nested within another destination. So due to the complex infrastructure of TrickBot, there is evidence that this really hasn't had much of an impact on them, and a punch in the gut and a rolling disruptive effort sums it up more than just an actual takedown.
That's probably quite accurate though, because you'd be dreaming if you think you could just go one big bang approach and all of a sudden the botnet's gone. Attackers are clever, they'll know that this is coming, or they'll be aware that people, it's in the press, for goodness sake, they're going to know this is coming. They're going to do what they can to try and remain operationally stable and resilient and try and defend against these counter activities themselves.
I mean, it remains within keeping of typical and more traditional law enforcement tactics, in that in normal law enforcement dealing with organised crime, you may not get the grand slam of catching them and locking them all up forever. sometimes just disrupting organised crime is a win in itself, because you make their crime and their organisation more expensive or less profitable and more difficult to run. That has an impact on them, and sometimes some people don't see that as a win, but it really is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, really true. Interesting space to see. We'll watch what happens. We always like to say that, but it is true. I'd love to see any more movements from the US Cyber Command and TrickBot's response to it. So the last news item, and I'm going to have to try and keep the best straight face and professionalism I can throughout this one, because it relates to the maker of a smart male chastity device has recommended using a screwdriver to break them open after warnings that it can be locked by remote hackers. This is genuinely hilarious. There is always some form of funny story to do with IoT devices getting popped by hackers, and every now and again you hit a gold mine, and this one just makes me laugh. So Will, Alex, I know you've looked into this a little bit this week. Please tell me a little bit more about this slightly in the bedroom form of IoT device and why we're going to have to start taking screwdrivers to it.
Essentially, this came off the back of some research conducted by Pentest partners, where they managed to gain control of the device over Bluetooth. If I'm looking at the article now, it basically says that using a remote attack over Bluetooth, they could permanently lock the user in the device, which to me sounds pretty horrific for a chastity belt.
I don't like the idea of it.
No, I don't like being permanently locked anywhere. And especially not permanently locked into that.
Let alone the crown jewels, right?
And the article mentions that, it kind of says that the only way to get out would be basically cutting your way out, or, I don't want to say bashing your way out, because that's
The best thing is, right, doesn't the article recommend taking an angle grinder to the chastity belt to get out of it? I'm sorry, if you're being
that is never going to happen. I would rather live without the use of my item than take an angle grinder to it.
I can only imagine a situation where you've got to really trust your friend, because no one's going to the fire department or A&E with this attached to them. So what it will be a case of is going down to B&Q, hiring an angle grinder, and then having a really, really good trusted friend.
I'll tell you what, though, I mean, on that related note about people going to A&E, there is a famous book, which is all around X-ray scans of what doctors have seen shoved up people's butts, basically. A Buzz Lightyear doll with the wings out has been seen, and all these sorts of things. So you never know, Will. There's somebody out there could be in A&E right now sitting with their chastity belt that's been hacked and locked by the attackers.
It goes on to say, the article, that there was other issues as well around location leaks, which I guess location data is perhaps part of the features, shall we say. That it was leaking location data and a lot of other personal information, but I think that's probably dwarfed by the fact that someone would be locked into it for quite a long time. Shout
out to Pentest partners, to be fair. They're always doing some really unique terms of research. I think the team are great. Really good article by them, and always putting a smile on our face. It does remind me of when I was working alongside Pentest partners organising a talk for a company, and I accidentally gave the nod to the presenter that he could go on to talk further about some of the devices he's hacked before, rather than just the standard kettle and doll that they've mentioned before, to which he proceeds to bring out a pink IoT dildo and vibrator and wave it in front of around a room of 200 people listening in a corporate environment. So I never forget how red I went and the amount of looks I got from the senior execs around me at that time, but we live and we learn.
You went the same colour as the dildo. The dildo was pink.
Oh dear, we never forget. Cool, so that wraps up the cyber news for that week. Definitely an interesting one for sure, and we'll jump into the topic of the week. So, topic of the week this week, it is October. We would be failures in the industry if we didn't mention Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So yes, October is here. That is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. If you haven't seen already across LinkedIn or the vendors and other areas, that people are really pushing not only the importance of cyber awareness training, but also using this as a really good opportunity to push some cyber education into their organizations. What I wanted to talk about this week is why that is so important. We often talk about some really cool things on Topic of the Week. We can dive into some technical detail. However, what we really want to address this week is how important cyber awareness is to an organization, and that although like-minded people like us are sitting at the forefront of cyber and understand it, and it's almost second nature to us, to the majority of people in an organization, they're completely oblivious to what the world of cyber is and the risks that surround them. So I want to touch on, firstly, why cybersecurity awareness training is so important. Basically, humans are the weakest link. Employees are the weakest link in the chain when it comes to cyber protection. And multiple studies have already stated that the only way to really protect against that is educating your users. Teach your users how to spot a phishing email and all these sorts of other topics as well. I hate using the term users. I was watching a TED Talk recently that basically said there's only two types of people that call their audience users. They are drug dealers or big tech firms, and both of which have some major cons to them right now. Well, drug dealers for sure. So employees, will call them people, humans. It is important to train them for phishing, about being safe on social media, and all these sorts of things as well. That means there are multiple different types of training. So guys, we've all done cybersecurity awareness training before. What types of training have you done in the past? What works for you? What do you think works for other people that might not be as cyber savvy, let's say, that we are?
What's really important in 2020, or just to say nowadays, it needs to be relevant. Your cyber awareness training cannot be just another tick box exercise. There is very little value in putting your employees through a mandatory training package that just drags on about phishing and about different scams. You need to tailor it to your organization and maybe even to your industry, so the users that are receiving it can actually relate to that. They can read through the training package and they can think, oh yeah, I've seen an email like that. Oh yeah, I do get phone calls like that. They need to be able to relate to what you're telling them in order for them to want to make a change. And the approach with cyber awareness training, it has to be embedded in the culture. It can't come from top down. It can't be that someone at the top is telling you to do it. I've seen really good examples of like cyber ambassador programs where you recruit different people throughout different organizations within the company. So you have someone in marketing, someone in sales, someone in just in various areas, and you empower them to want to spread the word amongst their colleagues. There's no point making it a top down approach. It has to come from within the organization. It has to breed within.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite a difficult thing to do. It's a real culture change within a company. The ways in which training can be delivered are videos, articles, blogs, the standard ways in which companies deliver training. But we've all been there, right, where you have your yearly fire safety training to do. You don't want it to become like a terms and conditions tick box that people just have on in the background, and when it's complete it says they've done it, and all of a sudden you think that your users are trained. There has to be a real, tangible and tactile approach to training users, so they actually listen and understand what is being taught around cyber awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alex, hit the nail on the head with those two really, especially around, them being relevant to people, and relevant to the people who are actually, trying to live with these things. I think. On top of that, I guess, which kind of falls under it, but concise. Basically the opposite of how I often am. Short to the point, because like you said, when it's time for your yearly e-learning suite, you sit down and you think, oh god, people are not going to sit there for half an hour and listen to someone talk about cyber and how you need to watch out for the latest. It's just kind of literally. You're shooting yourself in the foot, because people will set it to play and they'll piss off.
I've even been bored doing cyber awareness training before, just because sometimes it's just so dry. So I think one of the first things that we want you guys to take away listening to this is that relevant IT cybersecurity training is really important, but also helping it breed within the company and teaching people at the relevant level within teams and really trying to champion it from the inside out is a great way to approach cyber awareness training. Another key factor, aside from kind of formal training videos, quizzes, and all these sorts of things, is more around phishing specifically. And people don't tend to think about it, but phishing simulation exercises are a great way to drive cyber awareness. Now, essentially, this is a deliberate phishing attack against people in an organization where they receive an email that might send over a link. Now, clicking on that link will either present them with some form of response that, oh, look, you've been phished, and it makes them aware and will teach them, how they managed to get to the position where they were clicking on the link and what to look out for, because the email is specifically crafted to look like a phish. It also allows some great reporting for an organisation to understand where their weak points may be, and like Alex said, giving some really relevant and contextual training out to specific teams that might be considered some form of potential weak point. It's really important that we all stay cyber aware. Cybersecurity Awareness Month is a great way of kind of really looking into some of the free resources that are out there, collecting in a load of resources that you can use in your organisation to drive cybersecurity awareness training.
I think two things for me is you have to trust your gut feeling. If something generally doesn't feel right, it's most likely not going to be right. But also, if you're wrong in that situation, there's going to be no serious repercussions. I got, as an example, my energy supplier recently contacted me and they wanted to inquire about installing a smart meter. But they started off the conversation by asking me for some personal information, and it just didn't feel right to me, so I refused. And it turned out it was a legitimate call, but I refused to give over my information. Didn't feel right. And then they refused to go any further. So we were at a stalemate where the call couldn't proceed, but we sorted out a different way. No one's ever going to tell you off for questioning something like that.
Sounds like the energy supplier caught Alex on a bad day.
I do think it's quite achievable by everyone. A good example of this was literally about 2 days ago. So my mum texted me. She said, I was having a look at the message now. She said, "You're not my son." Oh, no,
That's staying in there, by the way. That's staying in there.
She said, "Wanted to talk to you. I think I may have been hacked by ransomware."
That's adorable.
So I was like, okay. So I called her, and she basically said she got 4 emails sent to her account that basically said, we've got all your data, a list that was ridiculously long, and then they said that if she doesn't pay some Bitcoin, they're going to sell that to the dark web.
Sell it to the dark web. If only I knew who the dark web was and I could sell it to them directly. Sorry.
Exactly. And I said to her, well done for catching that, because normally she's writing there, trying to transfer Bitcoin. But and I said to her, have you reported it as spam or phishing or whatever? She said no, because the button that says report as spam doesn't look right to me. And so I hovered over it, and it was a link back to their website. I was like, wow, if my mum at 66 and a massive technophobe can look at that and think, oh, that spam button doesn't look right, and work out. And I think that's totally within reach of everyone. I was really impressed with her in the end, even though okay, it wasn't ransomware, but I'm not gonna kick off about technology.
That's a really good point though, right? Don't overcomplicate it. Cyber awareness needs, like we've already said, right? Simplicity works. Why bother teaching people the intricacies of certain parts of cyber when the real quick wins are basic? Teach people to spot a difference. If your spam button looks different, it's an indicator that you might be getting something dodgy. And these are the real simple things that, like you said, Will, at a bare minimum, everyone can achieve this. Not everyone might be able to sit there and be able to look at a domain and see that it ends in .ru, meaning Russia, and therefore that could be potentially dodgy. That's probably a bit of a stretch too far. But looking at the grammar of an email that might look a bit off, or saying that they've hacked you and you don't believe you've done anything that could cause you to be hacked, then simple things like that are a red flag. And like Alex said, it's all about reporting it and challenging it. Don't sit there and not do anything about it. The education and the awareness here is tell someone about it and get the help and get the report, because once you've done that, you're going to be helping yourself and you're going to be helping your organization. And in most cases, I'd like to say 99% of cases, there's going to be no negative impact on yourself.
Can we start a new segment for best stories from parents?
We should do that.
My mum sent me a text the other day. She said, "Oh, I think I'm due a refund from Amazon, but I haven't got an Amazon account." I said, "Yeah, Mum, delete that email."
We've all been there for sure. But you tell you what, though, in a few years' time, let's say in 50 years' time, Will will be dead, Alex will be almost there, and I'll be still a spring chicken. But we'll be facing the new threats, right? We'll be facing something new that we'll be those people, right? Don't laugh.
Mate, in 50 years' time, you'll be what, 18?
Savage. So I guess what the takeaway from topic of the week this week is that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, is a great month to emphasise the need to train our employees, to train our colleagues all around cybersecurity and the impact that can have and how to spot potential threats against the organisation. Make sure the training is current, make sure it is relevant, and make sure it is simple and easy to understand, and don't try and overcomplicate it. Get those involved in your organisation if you haven't already. If your organisation has a dedicated cyber awareness team, go and have a chat with them, understand what they do, understand what they're looking to do in the organisation, and really try and build and buy into the ethos that they're trying to change the culture with their organisation for. We are here, we've landed, ta-da, at Secrets from the SOC, and this time we're going to be focusing on the cybersecurity certification roadmap, if you want to give it an official title. And so the reason we're doing this is we've had a lot of people recently write into us or contact us on social media and basically say, I want to get into cybersecurity. What exams do I need to pass? What do I need to study? And we really aim this podcast at emerging talent and future talent and those who are kind of junior in the industry wanting to kind of move forward. And there is this real bugbear of people wanting to get formally certified or knowing what the right exam to do is. I think a lot of this is because the education program teaches you that you must have a certification to say that you're qualified to do something. But what we wanted to map out was what, if you're going to do anything and you're going to focus on getting certifications, what the right ones to do are and probably what the right time to do them in your career is. Because lots of people have lots of different opinions on cybersecurity certifications. I don't think there is a right answer, but we're going to give you our open and honest opinion about what you could do. So, let's start right at the beginning. Alex, I'm a uni student, or I'm looking to get into the industry. Maybe I'm Fatima the ballerina making my career change. What is the first step? What is the first sort of certification that you think I should work towards or study to get my foot in the door for cybersecurity?
So I'll preface this by saying that I don't necessarily believe that everyone has to have certifications. However, some really good entry-level certifications do include CompTIA Security Plus, or SSCP. Also, Network Plus as a really, really good grounding into how networks work and how they operate. Because if you can get that down, then that's really going to give you a foot into understanding how to secure them. So I personally would recommend the CompTIA Security Plus or the SSCP as a really good entry-level certification. It gives you a bit of a roadmap and a bit of a guidance as to what are really important security domains to learn if you're brand new into the field.
I really want to hammer home about that Network Plus thing there, right? There's a leader who I've worked with for a long time who's basically said, when you really boil down to it at a simple level, cybersecurity and IT and systems talking to each other happens at one layer, and that is that happens at one layer, and that is that data packets are transferred across a network. And understanding the basics of computer networking and the simple foundations of how computers talk to each other, which is what is taught in CompTIA's Network Plus, gives you a really good overview into security, because they almost directly map into each other, and it's a great first step that removes some of the kind of cyber type elements of security and gives you what I think is a basic bread and butter that you should have when it comes to working with IT. But also Security Plus, I think, tops it for me. Out of that and SSCP, I think Security Plus by CompTIA is far more widely published and accepted and studied by a lot of people, and it really just gives you a perfect foundational understanding into the core components of cybersecurity and the reasons of what we do, why we do it, and what you should be thinking about. So I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I do not come from, the traditional educational background. I did go to uni, but I spent most of it getting drunk and not attending classes.
That's the Irish in you.
Then, well, it's got to be done, isn't it? And that was when university fees were cheap as well. So I wouldn't have done it currently for $9,000 a year.
$9,000 a year for a Zoom call, must I add, when you're locked in your room.
Yeah, ridiculous. Bless them. So I went into work, and I'm not the It's not that I'm not the biggest advocate of education, but it just didn't work very well.
For the system, is that what you're trying to say?
Oh yeah, basically. So I'm one of those people who joined information security without certifications, I guess. And the first one I did was Security Plus. I also don't really agree with the current trend or fashion of bashing certifications either. I think that they have their purpose and they have their place. They're not perfect. And they're not a one-stop shop, but they definitely have their select ones have their place. And so I don't buy into that either. But yeah, Security Plus, I'm just going to basically say, confer with you guys is for me was a really good foundational introduction. In hindsight, if I could go back, then I absolutely would have done Network Plus as well. Or something equivalent. Not necessarily bothered about the certification, but the education and the training for that would have helped with Sec Plus. It probably would have made my Sec Plus a little bit more easier to.
Yeah, I remember when I was studying Sec Plus, there are 3 elements I think that you'd want to be aware of. One is that there is a really interesting part of it that is learning about viruses, different types of attacks, and the cool side of security. You then have the side that I had no idea about, stuff that I really didn't understand.
Do you still know? Do you still know your dipole antennas from your other types of antennas?
Omni-channel, Yagi antenna, all of this. Exactly. And reading that as my first role in security, trying to push up, I'm like, what is this? Why do I need to know it? And it confused me. I don't want to know this stuff. And that's so and then the third category is the kind of boring stuff, and I must admit there is a little bit around kind of like data backups and what the best kind of backup procedures are to have, and a little bit about RAID arrays. It just didn't titillate me, let's say. So that's one thing to be aware of. There is some really interesting stuff, and I think that 80% of Security Plus genuinely is worth knowing and learning and understanding it, and you'll enjoy learning it. The other kind of 20 or so percent is made up of stuff that I have no clue about, and even today don't even quiz me on it. And then the stuff that might be a little bit boring, but is still good to learn, and that's why I think it's great to give you that kind of solid foundation.
I think it's your typical security, coverage where it's a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yeah, and I think that's really important at that level because it gives you a chance and to embrace opportunity when it comes your way, without being too pigeonholed too early. So, okay, we have Security Plus, we're working in a SOC or we're in a security function, and we say we want to progress onto the next thing and really focus on the next chapter of our career. What do you think, guys? Where are we going to go next?
Drum roll, please. What's the view? That was a great drum roll, Ed. Good job, man. So what's everyone's view on? So we have CEH. What's everyone's view on that as the next step?
Are you giving us more options, or are you just going to go with that one?
No, just as it's so something on that level, or others. CEH. So I know you've done it, Ed. Yeah. I know you've done CEH. So what's your view on that as an intermediary step? Because I don't think it's always seen as entry level. So if we're talking next step, What's your view on
I
it?
think so. CEH is Certified Ethical Hacker. It sounds great. It sounds really sexy because you can say, "Oh, I'm a certified ethical hacker," and naturally all the tricks come flooding, right? But
It's never once happened to you.
Yeah. But I think, I do agree with you. CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, is it takes it that one step beyond Security Plus, where it focuses on the real realm of cyber operations and that offensive side of security, which, and we've said so many times in this podcast about having that attacker mindset and being able to think like a bad guy, so you know how to, work against the bad guys. And I think CEH teaches you that at a really entry level. Although, Will, you've done a slightly similar one. I think, to put it simply, CEH is great for that entry-level understanding. Does get a little bit technical, though, and without hands-on experience with a few offensive tools and really being exposed to multiple different types of incident response scenarios, you can probably start somewhere else. And Will, you've done the junior penetration tester one, right? What do you think is the comparison between the EJPT and CEH? Do you think one's better than the other, or are they poles apart?
I think they are. I think they're aiming at two different types of audio, kind of results or conclusions in some ways. Because so I had a choice between doing, the e-learn security side of things or the CEH, and I went down the e-learn security route for the reason that it's a very well put together course. It's very up to date, and it was very hands on. So there's slides and there's that you work through, and then there was basically labs, that were all spun up on demand, and you walk through those labs, and then you do an exam, which is like a kind of mini pen test, I suppose, very very mini pen test. But it was very very hands on, and it explained everything, kind of in a very organised and constructive way, and I think that worked really well for me. And I still think it's a great introduction to,
but for a different audience,
security and pen testing. Less around pen testing. Yeah, I mean it's probably more for people who are looking to go down the offensive route, I'd argue. Although I did learn a lot from, because at the time I was still working in incident response. No, I did learn a lot.
Yeah, I think the benefit with CEH then is there is a theory and a practical side to it. And probably that's where CEH does fit this next step solution if you're working in kind of operations, would be that you get that really good understanding of offensive security, the tools that might be used and the theory behind it, without necessarily that hands-on ability to go and actually do hacking and penetration testing. You can do the theory then, which is that next level, which is probably better aligned to a career track of, like you said, a penetration tester, an offensive security professional. So, Alex, I think you're probably right there. I'd throw into the mix something like SSCP as well as a next step, because it will just widen your breadth of understanding on different areas within security. But if you're in operations, you've done Security Plus, and you're looking for the next kind of step, I think, good shout, Alex. CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, is probably a great next step. So, I guess once you're in that area, you're kind of, the world's your oyster. There's so many different routes that you can take. There are more ones focused, like Will said, around offensive security penetration testing. If you're working within the kind of information security policy, governance, risk type part, there are other certifications that you can go and do. But I think my recommendation would genuinely be, sit on your Sec Plus and CEH, gain some experience. Don't focus too much on getting some certifications that you must do. It's not a race to get as many as you want. Depending on where you are, though, might open opportunity to do something more focused around security operations and incident response. And Alex, you're lucky enough to have been doing SANS courses before, and what we'll say is that SANS courses are one of the most expensive cyber courses you can do there, but there are specific ones focused around incident response, which probably are a fantastic level that take your knowledge from Security Plus and from CH and apply to how to respond to its scenario.
Yeah, the good thing about SANS is that they're different domains, so I think by the time you've got to the point in your security career when you have a good understanding of the different domains, you can sort of focus on where you want to specialize. So be that incident handling, be it incident response, or forensic analysis. There's there are different areas that you can go into. So speaking as someone who is studying for one of the SANS certifications, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to these certifications, and a lot of really, really good course material, lots of really, really hands-on course material. So one of the big differences, if someone was to ask between the SANS course and the Security Plus, apart from the level, it's the amount of hands-on work and experience that you'd get from that certification. So it's all about how you would actually investigate, or how you'd actually look into a compromise of a device that's right in front of you. So you're literally on the command line and you are learning how to look for specific types of evidence. You're looking at how to investigate what process they're running on a computer and how they may have got there. It's a chance for you to really apply what you've learned along the way.
And these things take time. And I think the real difference between a more in-depth course like a SANS course and Sec Plus would be, you can sit down with the Sec Plus book, read it, do some of the videos and get that understanding and kind of regurgitate it in an exam. But when you get that into that level of your career where you're looking to specialize a little bit more for a real challenge when it comes to a certification, these SANS ones take time. They're not something that, unless you're a genius child or you're lucky enough to do these kind of firebrand intensive courses, SANS things take time. You need to dedicate time to them and learn them and apply what you're learning to different scenarios, because that's going to really strengthen your understanding. I think what I wanted to call out at the start, and I completely forgot, was that there is getting a certification to have it as a badge in your CV, and there is getting a certification that shows that you are educated and you really understand what you studied. And that's what I want to stress here, is that Sec Plus, SANS, whatever the course you're doing are, great that you've got the certificate, but do you really understand what you've studied? Are you able to apply that? That's what hiring managers want to see. That's what security managers, CISOs want to see. People that can apply that learning and have applied it. And these things take time to study. Cool. Well, thank you guys. I think really good opinions. We could sit here and talk about for ages. I'm sure people would disagree with us. But you know what? If you're listening to this, it gives you a starting point to go and do some Google searches and to look at the types of certifications that might relate to the ones that we mentioned, and form your own path. But the world is your oyster, the world is your lobster, and you can go and train away. And that wraps up the podcast for this week. We've got time just to jump into our key takeaways for this week. So, Mr. Stokes, you're back from holiday, you finished the podcast. What's the key takeaway?
I'm back from holiday and I have two just to make up for it. So oh,
okay. I don't know why I sounded so upset then. I mean, yes, thank you, Alex, thank you.
My first one is, don't underestimate the importance of knowledge of general IT and how computers work. If you want to be a penetration tester and you want to learn how to break into computers, you need to know how they work first of all. That's my first point. My second point picks up on something you just said, Ed. It's form your own path. So in cybersecurity, and at the moment in cybersecurity, there are lots of strong opinions and there are lots of strong egos, and that's absolutely fine. And you'll get a lot of differing opinions and lots of controversies. But when it comes down to it, form your own path, form your own opinion. I know people who have just come into the industry and they've got CISP, for example. I know people that have been in for years and they haven't got a single cert, but they're very successful. Form your own path and try not to be influenced too much by the strong opinions out there.
I guess my takeaway is going to be around what I said about the setting yourself a self-development budget. I think that's really a really important thing to do. It doesn't have to be much, even if it was 10-15 quid a month. Just set aside a little bit of money that you can invest in yourself and in your career, because if you continue that it will pay off.
Yeah, and just to add to that point as well, like investment in time and money, not just financial time, is also a great way of doing that. And that leaves it with me. My key takeaway for this episode relates to Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Woohoo! Let's all clap. Make sure you are doing your cyber awareness training if your company do it. If they don't do it, this is a great month to look at some of the free resources that are out there and think about how you can train some of your employees and your colleagues and your friends at work into how to spot some of the common types of cyber threat. And if that all fails and none of this resonates with you and you don't think cyber's for you, you can always become a ballet dancer. And that is what we have learned from the UK government this week. So that wraps up the podcast for this week. I want to thank you all for listening. Please do subscribe to our social medias. Go check out our website, hackableu.com. And if you do have any interesting stories or questions, let us know and email us at info@hackableu.com. Thank you guys. We will catch you all in the next episode.